Hey everybody, how are you today? So I know that we always do Man's Testimony, and that's our podcast, and it works out great. I love those stories, but part of our ministry, what we want to do is we want to try and teach men how to be better husbands, better fathers, and also better businessmen. Whether they're employers or employees doesn't really matter, but just acting appropriately like Christians in the workforce. So the first one we're going to do here today, we're going to actually talk about how to be a better husband. And in reality, what it's going to be is cleaning up the past, because if you can't clean up your past, you are not going to have a healthy, wonderful new relationship with your wife. So I'm bringing on Mark Howerton. He's the MFT marriage family therapist who's going to give us, I hope, the secret sauce on how to be a good husband.
Right on.
So
it's good to be
welcome to
here.
the show.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome back to the show, I should say. In case any of you guys want to go, I don't know what number he was. You were probably about number 46.
46,
yeah,
44,
about 46.
something like that.
Go back to our podcast, check out Mark Howerton. You can hear his testimony and how he almost died right there on the edge of the freeway.
Yep.
And here he is today, still smiling and having a great relationship with his wife. So I think it's okay for him to come and talk about this stuff.
Right on.
All right, so Mark, I want to specifically talk about cleaning up the past. And I think you had said family origin is kind of where it starts, right? And that's basically what our role model was growing up. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is just acknowledging that marriages can be tough. I think, to assume that our marriages will always be really easy and there won't ever be conflict and there won't ever be frustration or disappointment, that's a false assumption. So to realize that there is effort required in this, and we need to invest in who we are becoming as individuals and who we want to become as a married person in order to really have a healthy, sustained, loving, intimate marriage. And so part of that is checking out what is it that formulated my worldview about marriage in the first place. And so if I think that marriage is tough and marriage is destined to fail, I'm going to carry that into my current relationship. If my parents split up or if my parents weren't happy, I'm going to assume, unconsciously at least, that that's what I'll do or I'll become. So we have to proactively say, how do I change the messages of the past or the formula that I begin to assume about marriage early on in life? And so there's a couple of parts of that. The first is we need to look at our lives through a lens or a filter or a mirror to say, what are those assumptions? What did I learn about marriage from my parents? What did I come to believe by watching them? And acknowledge that is going to affect us. So to say, I learned, good about marriages from my folks, ways that they loved each other, ways that they stayed committed, and I learned about bad. We have to acknowledge both those. So I think the first part of it is to really say, what are those dominant messages that I heard, and see if there's a replacement for those ideas.
Let's break that down a little bit too, because a second ago you said, if my parents split up,
right, and
that's obviously a really big one. But also, what if my parents stay together and they just treated each other horribly, right? Then, even worse, we're going to go into a relationship now and actually treat somebody horrible because that's what we think it's supposed to be like. Now, and it's funny because I know, to me, it doesn't sound logical that because I saw something, it doesn't mean it's right, and I should be smart enough to know it's not right and not do it, but yet everybody does it. Why is that? Why?
That's so great. Well, because to your point, we actually are hopeful for the opposite. Going into marriage, nobody thinks initially this is going to stink. They're thinking this is bliss. Like, I so love my spouse. Like, we're going to have an amazing marriage. We're going to be happy the rest of our lives, happily ever after, is the whole...
She says one thing to piss you off.
And we're done. We're blowing up. We're blowing up. So to say, I didn't start this way. This was going to be good. Now I'm surprised that it's not going well. It's sort of that sucker punch. She says one thing and I'm, losing my cool.
One of the things that I heard a while back from another counselor, Christian counselor, she had said that, when we grow up, we see our mothers and our fathers doing certain things, right? Certain traits they have, and we might hate it growing up, but yet a lot of times we emulate it, and it's because what we know. She said, but you guys all have to remember that you are now adults, and you don't have to do what they did. It's all choice, and you can choose right now, today, to stop doing something that is not right for you and change. So I guess the big question is, how does one do that?
Yeah,
because it's not. I guess it's a little harder than it might sound.
Sure. Well, that to that point that counselor was saying is these messages have been ingrained in our unconscious brain, and we start out strong, we start out doing great, and then under stress, or under taxation from other factors in our life, we end up forgetting those positive messages and just go back to what was unconsciously drilled inside of us. So to constantly say on a daily basis, today I will be a good person. Today I will be a good man. Today I will be a good husband. Today I'll be a good father. It's almost like a daily mantra or a daily ritual. In the same way, hopefully we're exercising regularly. Well, I don't just wake up automatically and my body thinks I can't wait to exercise. I mean, some people do. God bless those guys. Like, I'm not one of those guys. For me, it's effort. So I have to put forth effort or discipline to say, I want to go and be the healthier version of myself today. I want to go and exercise. I want to show love in a healthy and an organic way. Even if I'm not feeling it, I still want to show it. And so it's that daily practice, like she said, this power of choice. I choose today to be a loving spouse. And some days are super easy, which is very organic and natural and flows right out of who we are. Some days require a little more intentionality.
You mentioned the gym. I go to the gym almost every morning, Monday through Friday, right? Every once in a while on the weekend. And it's not always easy to do. And it's not always fun, but it's become such a habit and such a pattern for me that it's part of my life. And I think I have to kind of relate it to that if you get in the habit of doing something like for example, being good to your wife, it becomes a habit and it doesn't become a chore. And even if she's not giving you something back at times, then it doesn't matter. You fight through it. So, and this is a men's ministry, by the way. So, if there's any women listening and this doesn't kind of make sense, but you go to the gym and you're sweating and you're fighting and you're pushing and all you do is feel pain. Why do you keep doing it? Because you're going to fight through it and it's going to be better. So I think, and I'm not the MFT here, but, and I still fight with my wife all the time. But, I keep fighting for the relationship. And I would think it's similar to the gym. You fight through that pain because what you're going to get, the gain you're going to get from it afterwards is really what's going to be the most beneficial piece. Yeah.
Well, in case in point with the gym, and I really love that illustration. In fact, I've got a book coming out this fall, and I use the term relational fitness. And the whole idea is that it requires this effort to maintain fitness in our relationship, just like with physical fitness. But there's two parts of that. One part is I may like the way I look on the outside. So I like that, I'm staying fit, or that I look good at the beach this summer, or whatever the case may be. And that's an external stimuli. I feel like, cool, I want my wife to think that I'm attractive. I want my kids to see me as a big, strong guy, whatever. But the internal motivation is I feel more energy. I typically feel better about myself having done that. I'm happier that I got up and went instead of sat on the couch or stayed in bed. So there's an internal benefit and an external benefit. And the same with our relationship. So to say internally, I'm feeling that sense of closeness and intimacy and just that natural connection. That's ultimately what we want to have in our healthy, vibrant relationships. But then on the outside, to know I'm still doing the good things to physically, or in this case, relationally personify health and well-being to my wife, being a model to my kids, being a model to friends of mine in the community. And so I have that internal and external motivation to say, I want to be this better, healthier version of myself.
So let's move on to the next one now. As the title says, cleaning up the past.
Great.
Right? There's the family origin, which is way back, and that's kind of deep rooted. Yeah. But then there's the relationships you've had from that time you started until the time you got married. And I would imagine, and you tell me, but just the past relationships are exactly that. They are the past.
Right.
So my advice to people is get rid of them. They're there as memories and leave them there. That's it. That's all you got. But I think from your point of view, you're going to look at it as kind of like the issues that happened in them, right? Because you're more the therapist guy.
Well, yeah, and there's certainly the unconscious psychology of it, but there's also pragmatic reality. And I can't tell you how many guys I talk to who find themselves really getting tangled up with old high school girlfriends on Facebook, and just these interesting little conversations can become inappropriate and then become an emotionally engaged or even physical affair if it's not checked. And the reason that that's happening is because there's this longing for some deeper connection or rekindling what they once had. And so it's so important to realize that just because I have or even have emotions about past relationships doesn't mean that I need to foster those things. So it's just like I have fond memories of going to Disneyland with my family as a little, 8-year-old kid. I had a lot of fun doing that. But know that when I go to Disneyland now, it's not the same thing. And I don't need to have that filter of expectation. So I'm actually, really, it kind of shocks people. I tell people, if you are thinking about a past relationship, take a moment and acknowledge that was a powerful thing. That was shaping your emotional being. There was discovery there. There was love there. There was emotion. Those are all fine and good things. Acknowledge that those were, in fact, a thing, a reality, something that shaped who you are. And then release it. Take a breath. Leave it there. Don't try to re-engage with it. Don't try to pursue it. Don't try to reactivate it, because it is just that. It is that fond memory. It is that nostalgia of me being 8 years old for the first time, walking down Disneyland, having this wonderful emotion. Cool. I experienced it. And that's on the positive side. The reality is also a lot of our past experiences shaped us negatively. So if our past experiences were kind of awkward or unwelcome sexual discovery, or maybe acting out of sexual sin in ways that we don't hold to as men of faith today, realizing that those also began to mar or mark our worldview and our emotional sort of a palette of who we are and how we perceive our current self and sexual relationship. So certainly, we don't want to foster, we don't want to rekindle, we don't want to live in fantasy there. And we can talk about lust and pornography, and as an important topic in and of itself. But knowing that those do not serve us in our healthy relationship today. And specifically, lust and pornography is based on this idea of fantasy or really distorted reality. Yeah. And marriage, and specifically sexual intimacy in marriage, is the apex of reality. There is no distortion. There is no perception. There is no filters. It is 100% real. And ironically, so is marriage. So when we're having fun in our marriage and we're connecting and we're raising our kids well and having a fun date night, or and having these good experiences together, and we're having hard experiences together, that's real. That's unfiltered, unedited reality, and that's really what we're wired for. That's what we're designed for. So we want to be able to foster more of those encounters. So when the past comes up, thinking about how great that was, thinking about how cool that was, well, sure, I was also 18 years old. I also didn't have a mortgage. I also didn't have, 3 kids running around. I also didn't have all these other things that were, distracting me and stressing me out. And so leave that in the past. Acknowledge it for what it was. Leave it in the past.
You mentioned emotional affairs, Facebook, let's just call it social media. How common is that these days, that people will rekindle with somebody from high school, and the next thing you know, they're actually having an affair, purely non-physical? But does that non-physical affair screw up your head just as much as the physical affair? That's a great question. And a lot of people think it's not that big of a deal. Hey, we didn't have an affair. We just chatted on Facebook or privately in text and whatnot. And it is equally devastating, if not in some way even say more devastating. There's basically 2 categories. There's pure sort of lust, carnal expression of infidelity and affair. And then there's this emotional side. And I think it really, there might even be a value to say who's more vulnerable to what side of it. Stereotypically, the conversation was more women would be vulnerable to an emotional affair. More guys would be open to a physical affair. Just like, for example, more men may be tempted and struggle with pornography. More women may be tempted and struggle with,
romance novels or something about, sort of like, or The Bachelor, Bachelorette, that kind of
That's
has
the next thing I want to talk about too, because you got all this trash on TV, garbage in, garbage out.
Oh my gosh.
All right, let's hold that for later.
Let's do the Bachelor, Bachelorette show another time. But the vulnerability's there. And so sometimes guys are sucker punched. They think, well, you know what? I'm more visually, tempted than emotionally tempted. So no big deal that I chat with my, whatever old high school, sweetheart. And then just like that, they can find themselves engaged in that emotional need. Never, to touch on affairs, never does somebody wake up and say, I think I'm going to go have an affair. Right. It's a slow sort of just, de-evolution, sort of lowering the standards and, boundaries, and suddenly find themselves vulnerable to really getting sucker punched with, wow, I really appreciated that, email I got.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to me.
And it always would come at a time when there was an issue at home, right? And then next thing you know, you got somebody over here saying something nice.
Right. It's a gradual disconnect in the home and in a marriage, and then a gradual connect outside the marriage. And
so
we get hit with it.
I again, it's a men's ministry. I don't want to beat around the bush. So what do you do? How do you stop that? How do you be a better husband by not doing that? So I know all that stuff happens.
Right.
So now some guys engaged, if you're somehow engaged in what we just talked about,
great.
How do you bam, knock it straight off?
That's great. And first of all, reach out for help. You're not going to do it alone. And whether or not that you call a professional like myself, or you just grab a hold of one of your bros and say, dude, I got to be honest with you.
And a Christian bro that has those kind of values, because there's a lot of bros out there that will say, oh, dude, don't say anything. Just keep it on the down low, right?
Yeah. You want, the objective is this. And even frankly, when people come to see me, I don't want to, and I won't be someone who will help facilitate infidelity. And so the objective is to say, I need to move away from this relationship, period. And so working away from the relationship, moving away from the relationship is, first of all, that acknowledgement that you've gotten ensnared into it. You've gotten pulled into it. If the first level of it is just that boundary violation and you're emotionally engaging with someone on social media or whatnot, realize that you are just walking a very dangerous slippery slope. And it may have already crossed that line. It may have crossed that line already to more emotionally inappropriate sexual language and how you're talking to each other. So just cut it off. Whatever it takes, you cut it off. Specifically to the individual is going to be one part of it. I can't do this anymore. But if that's all that you do, it won't last. If that's all that you do, 9 times out of 10, it'll come back around. And so you've got to say, I need somebody else in my life that I can have as a barrier between me and engaging in this behavior. So to get a Christian bro, to get a Christian counselor, to talk to a pastor, say, I've got to eliminate this. Because here's the deal. It's coming from this emotional felt need. I may not be experiencing it in my marriage right now, and so we're going to have to rekindle that and rebuild the intimacy in the marriage if we can. But even if not, I can experience an appropriate level of intimacy with my friends, with my Christian brothers, that help sort of satisfy some of that wounded man feeling I have that gets a vulnerable stroke or this felt need stroke when I engage with someone on the internet like that. So to say, I want to have this intimate friendship, the strong male friendship as a part of my overall support system so that I won't be as vulnerable. And that's a crazy thing. Our expectation in marriage is that we have a spouse that we are passionately sexually excited and attracted to, intellectually stimulated by, totally emotionally connected with, spiritually challenged and engaging with, all these fun things. And we have this huge expectation that we put on this one person, and it's not realistic. So to be a healthy man in my marriage, I need to be a healthy man outside my marriage. And part of that's connecting with my intimate friends. And guys, I do. I've got 2 men that I meet with. We're together almost once a week for an hour or so, talking very honestly about our struggles, about our temptations, about our goals, about our hopes, about our aspirations as men, as husbands, as fathers, as business owners. And that intimate friendship builds me up in a healthy way that allows me to be fully connected in my marriage. And obviously, I don't want it to be a substitute, but it's a supplement that helps me be this healthy whole person when I walk into my home. So getting that emotional need met in healthy ways is goes hand in hand with that first cutting off of any conversation that's happening outside the marriage.
And I think too, like if you're stuck on the social media piece, just gotta delete, ban, Don't ever allow that to ever come back in. I mean, get rid of it completely. If you need to take yourself off of social media 100%, then I think that's wise. Then maybe that's what you should do. If you can truly hack it and not keep going kind of over that line, then just delete certain people and don't go looking for it. Mm-hmm. Just knock it off.
Yeah.
So what's next? What about the next piece now?
Okay. So then once we've identified, you know what, I got some rough messages from my family of origin, and I need to identify what those are and redefine successful marriage. So some folks, like I said, grew up with marriages and said, we just stayed together for the kids' sake or whatever the case is, or because, God hates divorce, so therefore we just stayed together. Well, God hates divorce, but God also hates dysfunctional relationships. So the challenge is not, well, just don't get divorced so you honor God. The challenge is make your relationship healthy. Make your relationship more functional to honor God. And so I think we can do both. I mean, we can stay married and foster health. So we need to identify what were those negative messages that we got from our family of origin, redefine successful marriage. So marriage is not just staying together. Marriage is fostering intimacy through every stage of the game. Before we have kids, while we have kids, while we have teenagers, while our kids leave the home, what does this evolution of relationship and intimacy look like in each of those categories? And know that we have to redefine that step by step. And we can do that by seeking counsel, hearing pastors, reading books. Like, let's learn from those who have gone before us. So redefining the messages of our past, cleaning up our past, leaving it back there, not re-engaging in anything, and again, sorry, I just can't leave it alone. That's also the challenge when we enter into the stage of midlife. So from, late 30s, early 40s to, early mid 50s, there's this question of, wait a second, have I made the right choice? I've now been married, 15 to 25 years. Was that the right thing to do? I've now had this career for the last 15 to 20 years. Is that a good thing to do? I now live in this community. Is that the good thing to do? And so there's this appropriate questioning that's a part of who we are in our lives. We have to have a healthy filter by which we ask those questions. So people call me. People reach out to their friends. People go to men's groups. People go to their pastors. People are looking for something. Wise people are looking for something to walk through that stage of life with. Unwise people walk through and find themselves, falling into the cliches of the young girlfriend in the sports car and whatnot, hoping that will satisfy, but it really won't. Yeah. It's a much deeper longing. So the deeper longing that's coming from assessment of who we are and where we're about and where we're struggling. From there, the final stage is, what is now this active truth that I've replaced with those lies or those faulty ideas about myself and about my marriage and about expectations of what my life should look like. And that looks like now, again, this idea of the mantra that I mentioned earlier, to say on the regular daily basis, here's who I am, here's who I want to be, here's who I'm becoming. So I understand that I am a person that is in the growing process. This is who I am. This is who I'm becoming. I am a man of God and I'm becoming more godly. I am a patient man and I'm becoming more patient. Certainly there's failures, there's struggles, there's times we slip, both in our past and in our present. But the active state of being, I am actively becoming a more present husband, a more passionate, a more compassionate father, a more intimately vulnerable marriage partner. That's going to be my state of being, as opposed to I'm stagnant. Yeah, I'm stuck.
I think, an older guy years ago told me something that really made sense. And he told me that he got married young. His business was taking off. He was traveling all over the world for business. His wife was at home, didn't work. And he said that, he goes, I was growing. And I was just going off in this direction and really growing. And my wife, well, she was growing too. Naturally, you always grow. But she was growing in this direction because of what she saw and heard. I saw and heard this. I grew this direction. She grew that direction. And eventually, he said he had an affair on her. He thanks the Lord every single day that she didn't leave him. And some older guy back then gave him the advice of, if you want to have a healthy relationship, as you guys are getting older, you have to realize that, you're experiencing things. And if you can figure out how to experience those things together, you'll typically grow in the same direction. And he said from that point forward, he started bringing her on most of the trips, started talking to her about some of the stuff, got her engaged in what he does, and that way he can have somebody to talk to about it as well. And they've been married. This was 20 years ago, but they were already married for 25 years, and he was still a young guy at that point.
Yeah.
The other piece too, and it's my viewpoint on it, is that get yourself in a good church and go regularly. Get yourself in a couples group type thing where you meet once a week or every other week. It doesn't matter, whatever. But do it regularly as a group as well. And I believe that having a lot of those core values that you consistently talk about with your spouse and back and forth with each other probably will go a really long way in helping you to always maintain that level of standard that you should be at as a man, as a married man.
Yeah. Well, and here's the deal: even if you sometimes don't love the church that you attend, and I get this from time to time, people say, "Well, I don't like that pastor, or I don't like that worship style, whatever." I mean, that stuff is so petty. The idea of saying I'm committed to something greater than myself, well, that's God. And that local church is just one small expression of God. So I don't need to just be enamored by that pastor's teaching or by the worship style or by the programs that they do. I need to go because that's my devotion to God, which holds me in a larger parameter. It says this is what it means to be a godly man. Sure, find a men's ministry. Maybe there's a different pastor that you can learn teachings from and different books you can read. That's all great. If you need to change churches, change churches. But there's no perfect church. There's just not. And so I need to say these general parameters of the scriptural teaching of what it means to be a good and godly man will help me be a good godly husband, and my regular attendance in that church holds me to that alignment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Mark Howerton, marriage family therapist, I appreciate you coming on here talking about it. And I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna ask you a bunch of other questions on some of our other shows. So look through our website at godsmenofinfluence.org, as well as you can go to our YouTube channel, God's Men of Influence, and of course Facebook, and hit the like button. Make sure you support us there, and just you'll be able to see all the daily stuff that we do. Thank you again so much. Remember, be blessed, be joyous, and be welcome to God's Men of Influence.